we are big Wiggles fans in our household. The Wiggles are good. They've got some good songs.
Yeah.
Beat Beat Buckle Up is one of our favorites.
Yeah.
It's another good show.
That's funny. Isabella Soul was at our house last night, and they put on like the Google Home, and what's the mashed banana?
Oh yeah, mashed potato.
Is that
what is it?
Is that fruit salad? Is that what's on?
Fruit
No,
salad.
that's a different one.
Yummy, yummy. Fruit salad.
I love that you know it.
What's the? Is it spaghetti?
It's well, it has three different ones. So it's hot potato.
It's hot potato.
Ah, yeah.
Hot potato, and then mashed banana, and cold spaghetti, cold spaghetti.
Right. Oh man.
So the Wiggles are good.
Hey James.
Hey Mike.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
You know, I feel like we're not alone.
We're not.
I feel like we're being watched.
Yeah.
Rachel.
Hey!
Welcome.
Hey!
Woo! Hey Rach.
Our
Hey.
first special guest.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We're excited to talk all about worship and this coming week and all the different things that are going to happen. Before we do that, just like 3 or 4 minutes on this past Sunday, because you said something that was interesting, and it was something that I was struggling with through the week, and I'm just curious on how it landed. Because I went home and I said to Lauren, like, how did that go? For the last week we talked about humility, and this week we talked about, keeping our head on straight. And there's this weird part about my job, which is you need to define reality, and you need to be an encouragement and a person who pushes the buttons and all of that stuff. And part of defining reality is looking at ourselves and going, we need to work on some stuff.
Yeah.
And then part of defining reality is going, we're doing okay on some stuff. And I know somebody came to you this week and said, how do we talk about how well we're doing while being humble about it? Which is like the whole struggle, right? This is what we talked about last week. And I don't know how well I walked the line. I don't necessarily need a report card, but how do you think we do that? Because I think it's important that we look at the church body and go, you guys are doing a good job. While also being able to say, let's keep our heads on and let's keep going. How did you, we'll start with you. How did you hear that? How did it land? And then...
Yeah, so it was in the middle of the service, and somebody, come up to me and said, it's interesting. Like, how do we do the humility thing while we're, talking about the things we're doing right?
Yeah.
And that is the challenge. I mean, that the week before was, how to be humble. And it's, we find that challenging. But there's nothing wrong with living out of your strengths and acknowledging that God has given you certain gifts and talents. And as a general rule, right? Like, we should be able to celebrate the things that God is doing in our lives. I think the where it breaks down is when you become prideful and you begin to let those things define you, as opposed to, we talk a lot about mission, right? Being on mission is focusing on the task at hand, as opposed to, focusing on what you're doing well all the time. Yeah. We can acknowledge it, but let's not live there. It was just interesting that we talked about humility last week, and then we're talking about, a little bit about what we're doing well. That's an interesting dynamic.
How do you do that?
Yeah.
Rach, you deal with this a lot because, and we're going to talk a lot about worship today.
Yeah.
And so you're very good at your job. Everybody knows it. And there are a lot of days where you come off the stage, right, and you go, oh, like that was not as good as I would have wanted. And there are some days that you come off and go, that's kind of what I was looking for.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to stay humble, but also you can't go home every day just like down on yourself for how things went.
Yeah.
But also your job is worship, which we're going to get into.
Yeah.
How do you balance that, boosting yourself up enough to be encouraged with, not shouting from the rooftops that you're actually quite good at what you do?
Yeah. No, those are interesting things that you've said, because definitely I agree with all of those things. For me, it's more of a celebration of what God is doing. Mm-hmm. And so when things go well, if you want to put it that way, like when we've had a great Sunday, like this past Sunday, I loved that service. And that was a service that I thought went really well, because it just felt like the room was really connecting with God and engaging with the songs that we were doing. And I just thought it was a really sweet moment that like the whole congregation, kids even included, we sang Jesus Loves Me. And just when we started singing that, like you could hear the kids singing, and that was a beautiful moment. And I think, you know, in the whole humility conversation, like I know that if I try and do this job of being a worship leader out of my own strength, like it's not going to go well. But asking God to use me and to work through me, like I would say that's what kind of helps keep me humble. Just knowing that if things do go well, if we have a great morning together, well, it's God. Like it's all about him. And it's just celebrating that. And so when you were saying like, we have a great church, and when we talk about when we talk about that, like I think it's great to celebrate what God is doing among our people, and then also our church is changing, and so we're going to have to change too, and we're going to have to grow. You know, in one area is like we have a lot of newcomers coming, and so that's a little bit different. So we're in a season of growth. So, you know, one area that we might have to grow in is like, how do we reach out to these newcomers and be, you know, hospitable? Because I think that we do have a hospitable church, but like, how can we be growing in that area? So it's just the two, right? It's the two. We're doing a great job because God is in our midst, and we're yielding our lives and our church to him and our ministry to him. And then also God help us to grow.
It's something really interesting too. Like, I think the days where you maybe come off stage and you think, oh, this, that, or the other thing went wrong. And you be tempted maybe to get down on yourself.
Yeah.
I don't know about your experience, but my experience is that those are the days when people will come up to you and say, you know, that really touched me. Or, you know, I really appreciated that. And you're going like, what? What did you appreciate? Like, I felt like it tanked. I mean, you've had this discussion, Mike, as well, right? And I think it just shows that, you know, we're not doing it on our own.
Yeah.
If we've had a bad day and people are still we feel we've had a bad day and people are still being blessed, I think for me, that's evidence that God is in it. He's doing things in spite of us. And I think that's a good place to start from in humility too, is that God is going to do what God's going to do either in spite of us or with us. That part is a choice for us, right? We can choose to partner with God in it, or we can choose to sort of just go along for the ride. But God will accomplish what God wants to do. Mm-hmm. So, and I think for me, that's an encouragement. If I feel like I've had a bad day, and somebody comes along and says it blessed them, I'm like, yay, God.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, God. Yeah.
It's that quote from last week that I used. It's been stuck in my head since I saw it a few weeks ago, which is, you know, I pray like everything depends on God, and then I work like everything depends on me. Like you put your nose down, you work hard, but at the end of the day, you know that it's not where it comes from. I think that I'm going to kick a hornet's nest, and then I'm going to run away from it because we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. But just for fun, maybe for another day. I think there's an interesting conversation to be had. Something that you just said, which is absolutely true, which is like, I feel like when things go really well, it's God. And I think that the question that a lot of people ask is, well, when it doesn't go well, was that God too?
Yeah.
Or when you feel like you leaned in and you prayed and you did everything you well and it didn't go well.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's a whole can of worms that maybe we get into another day. But I like to say this stuff out loud just to acknowledge that somebody out there is thinking, well, yeah, but what about the opposite?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we think
So
about
true.
that.
Think
It's
about
hard to live there. But
yeah.
So this week, a couple of months ago, we pitched this idea of this worship service, of a service primarily focused around. Initially, we talked about music and scripture, and we had a conversation about what that could look like, something that perhaps allowed people to lean in to the worship experience in a different way, to give them maybe an opportunity to worship and go deeper in a new way. And as we started talking about it more, the conversations that we started having, which are the ones you need to have when you come up with this stuff, is, well, what is worship? What are we talking about? Because the language, you know, this is a Presbyterian church from a very traditional Reformed background. When you go to a Presbyterian college and they talk about worship, they're not talking about the music.
Right.
They're talking about what happens from the moment the service starts to the moment the service ends. But in a lot of more contemporary worship style churches, when we use the word worship, we're talking about music a lot, right? Like it's the worship team, as if the rest of the team isn't also trying to help people worship. So I think the place we need to start here is when we use the word worship, what are we talking about? And since you are our worship pastor,
I should know this, right?
you have all the answers. They were all in your resume and your cover letter, and we got them all in the interview. So if you no, but what, like, let's start this conversation. Like when you think about your job and what worship is, and I know you've been actually doing a lot of behind the scenes work on that lately.
Yeah.
What have you been thinking about?
Yeah. Well, to start off, I have an understanding of worship at this spot that I'm at in my life. And I know that God will continue to expand that and show me new things, and I'll do different readings and come across different things. But I have had like the experience of learning at Tyndale about worship. I took courses in that, and then just lots of hands-on experience worship leading. And so I've had a lot of time to kind of think about this. And the thing about the conversation of worship is that there are just so many elements that you could, choose to focus on. And the conversation is so broad that it can go a million different directions. And since a couple months ago, and we knew that we were going to be doing this podcast and this coming Sunday service, we're going to be doing a worship service, which, I mean, even just saying those words, like every Sunday is a worship service, right?
And that's part of this conversation.
So
what does
there
that
we
mean?
go.
Right?
I know we're already getting into it. But yeah, just for me, I heard from a worship pastor that I really respect. His name is Jeremy Riddle, and he wrote a book and he's done podcasts, and just listening to him, just very simply, worship is to love Jesus and to learn to love Jesus more. And so when we start the conversation of worship, there's like different aspects. There's like personal, like individual worship. And then there's congregational worship, which is what we're going to be talking about today. When we meet, when the church gathers in any shape or form. And then there's just worship, like general worship. Like I read this quote once that said, like, if you're breathing, you are worshiping. It might not be God, but you're worshiping. Like,
Whoa.
That's deep.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And so like the reality is that God made us and he created us and designed us for worship. And it's a lifelong journey, and one that is beautiful. Like, it's just beautiful to be in the presence of God and be aware of his spirit. And, sometimes we're not aware of his spirit, but he promises that to us, that, that he'll be in our midst. And so today when we sit down, my kind of focus when I talk about and when I use the word worship is congregational worship. And when the church gathers together and, and just takes that time to focus on Jesus. Yeah. And so worship is just loving Jesus. It's giving him praise and, giving him worth. And so we can do that through the word and preaching and reading his word and diving into that. We can do that through prayer, talking with him. And then music obviously is one that's very close to my heart, because God has given me the ability to play instruments and sing. And I just love connecting with God in that way. And I love leading people in that too. Like, that brings me so much joy just to facilitate that. And I sang at a funeral on Saturday, and honestly, I could have been moved to tears, but I really try hard in funerals not to cry, because it's like opening the floodgates. But it was really beautiful just to sing these hymns with people that I've known for a long time. And when you think about, the person who passed away, just being in the presence of God and singing with angels and being in heaven and just experiencing that, it's like a beautiful thought. So yeah, I love it. It brings me joy to be in this position as the worship pastor here. And yeah.
I love what you said about, if you're breathing, you're worshiping. I think that's really cool. It reminded me in the moment of, Jesus coming into Jerusalem, and I think it was the Roman guards were saying, like, tell your people to settle down. He says, well, if the rocks will cry out, and it just speaks to this idea that when creation is doing what creation was meant to do, it's worship.
Yeah.
It's the reason why when you look at a beautiful sunset, it warms your heart, and you're like, wow, that's God. Like God is doing something really cool in that. And I think, for us too, like when we get to heaven, and we get to do life for all eternity the way God designed us to do it, it's worship. And it blesses God's heart. Yeah, neat.
You've got a cool job. What, before we get into what your job is, and we're going to touch on all this stuff as we go, where did this come from? Like, interestingly, I would bet, and now I don't know, but at whatever point you started singing and got to the point where you knew you were good and went, I think I want to do this vocationally, and what's that avenue? Growing up in an environment where they call the music person the worship pastor, and you had a couple good ones to look up to. At some point you probably went, I want to be a worship pastor, but maybe you didn't think about worship in the depth that you just explained it because you were 14 or whatever. Where did this come from? Like, where did you finally go, like, I think this is a calling, this is what I'd like to do? What did that look like? And how has that journey sort of progressed and changed as you have figured it out?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. When I think about it, I think back like to when I was really little and my mom was working at the church. She was the organist. But then in that time, like in the 90s is when worship started changing at IPC. My mom, Barb Yoncher, and Chris Little, they were working together at the church and bringing a lot of change. Before, my mom would select hymns out of the hymn book. She'd play them on the organ and then or on the piano. And that's kind of what their music time would look like. And then in the 90s, it started changing to like a band setting, and they would have singers on stage, and the songs just changed from like your traditional hymns to like more contemporary at that time songs that they would still be a hymn, but just like songs that people have written for God and for congregations to sing together.
It was the progression, right? It was hymns, and then it was like, Shine on Me, right? And like that was pretty like, we're starting to move, and then obviously
now is the time to worship.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. And then of course you had more instruments and more band. And I went to a church, I don't know where you grew up, but I went to a church that did the same thing. I remember the organ and the piano. Yeah. And then the organ was gone, the piano was there, and then it was piano and acoustic, and then there was like a bassist in the corner, and then they started getting closer to the middle. And Yeah. So worship has like really changed and evolved. And I think that always I've just had a love for music, and just seeing, like I had so many people around me that were leading the music in a church setting. And that was always called out in me too. And so that was really neat. And of course, having my older sisters who, led worship and led the youth bands. And so from a young age, I specifically remember when I was like 12 thinking, I don't know if I want to be a missionary or if I want to be a worship leader. And that was like my big question. Like, what am I going to do? Am I going to be a missionary or do worship? And I never really strayed from that path. And it's always been a desire of mine. Did you and Bree like draw straws at some point?
Yeah. I loved watching my sisters lead, and that was a huge blessing for me, just to witness people like that are older than me and more experienced, and just have more experiences with God, just to glean from them and learn from them. Like that was a huge blessing for me, for sure. Yeah.
It's the importance of people pouring into the next generation, even if it's not that big of a gap,
Yeah.
But
sure.
the value of that. I don't know if you remember this or not, and maybe I'm making an assumption here, but I remember walking into Dairy Queen years ago, and you and Benj were sitting at the table, and I think Benj was talking to you about worship leading and about what your path would look like. I just got that sense that there was some mentoring happening there.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of a neat moment that I had a glimpse of. And I think, and again, I might be filling in details that maybe weren't there, but...
I wish I could remember the conversation now. Oh, man. Benj. Yeah, so Benj Gillen was the worship pastor here when I was in high school. And so he took me under his wing, and I learned a lot from him. Yeah. And I had a lot of requests. Can we please do this new Bethel song? Can we please? Like every week I'd be like, we have to do this song. And he'd be like, Rachel, we can't introduce all these new songs. And
very cool.
There was he taught me how to play guitar and how to choose worship sets and how to choose songs and arrange and kind of have a flow. And he talked me through all that. So.
You've had a lot. Well, I mean, you had your family, right? Your sisters and your mom, and then Benj. But you've had mentors out west, and here, and you've done a lot of schooling. Like, this isn't something that you just rolled out of bed and decided to start playing out front. Like, you've done a lot of work to get to the spot that you're at.
Yeah. I have had a lot of mentors and influences, and just a lot of times, like I've led worship for a lot of services, and honestly, that is the best teacher, is just doing it and trying new things. And even though I grew up at IPC, even coming back, like I just feel like I'm learning constantly, and it's slow. And I think that, I'm 28 years old, and I kind of think, I always thought when I was younger that, people my age had it all together, that they had it all figured out. And that's not really the case. Yeah. It's like we're just slow to learn, right? Just people. Like I think about the Israelites. Man, you read about them. They're just slow to learn. And I just feel like that's me too. So God's been very gracious and just teaching me and humbling me. And my prayer is just that I would stay hungry for him, and that desire for him would continue to grow even in the different seasons of life. And the different contexts too that I've been put in. So, yeah.
So like, we'll get a little bit more into philosophy of worship in a minute. What's your job? Like, okay, so there are people, most people, whatever, but there are people that are like, man, must be nice to be a pastor, come up, work a couple hours a week, just grab a coffee the rest of the week. You got to prep for an hour. I've had people, not necessarily about you, but about worship, in general. It's like, well, it's just 4 songs, 5 songs, grab an instrument, practice for a couple hours and rip them up. Like what does this job really take anyways?
I mean, it could be like that. It
could be.
Yeah.
I think we would notice.
Yeah.
So, like not a line by line job description, but, even, when you put a job description for a job out, so often only a third of that job. I mean, how many jobs do you have that aren't on your job description?
We're not talking about me.
Well, I'm just saying. So what do you do around here anyways?
Yeah, I would say that primarily
for those that are listening, sorry, on audio, I'm smiling as I say that.
What do I do around here?
What are you doing here?
Drink lots of coffee.
Yeah, we have to armbar you just to get you into the office. No. Seriously, what does it mean to be the worship pastor here?
Yeah. So primarily I am, during the weeks, I am planning the worship services. And so that can look like scheduling volunteers and just trying to create a flow on Sundays. We work together a lot and meet a lot, just talking about, what's going to be happening and just trying to make sure that we're kind of synchronized and like what you're speaking on and what the songs, what kind of songs and what kind of atmosphere we want to create on a Sunday, and just the challenge, I would say, or one of the things that's really important is just hearing from God and just seeking his guidance, because it's really easy just to go into autopilot, which I've definitely done in the past. You just go into autopilot and you just try and, you know, you can think of all these practical reasons why I just need to make this set and, you know, schedule these volunteers, and we just kind of go through the motions. But really, like, that's not my desire. That is not God's desire. He, you know, God is speaking. He's alive. He's here. And he's always speaking. And so we just need to like tune our ears just to like hear from him. And some weeks, you know, it's the day before or that morning that I sense God is like leading me in a certain direction. Sometimes it's not at all. Sometimes there's a lot of more forethought to it. But yeah, I would say that that's a really important part of my job, is just like hearing from God and like, and letting him lead me in the planning of these worship services. And then for special services that we have, like Christmas and Easter and all of that, there's a lot of planning that goes into those services because they're really important for the church, and you want it to be a little bit more special and put more energy into those services. And so in the past, we've had choirs and things like that, and bigger bands and more rehearsals. And so James and I work a lot together too, just coordinating all of the volunteers and working with a lot of tech on stage and in the sound booth. You could probably speak more to that than I can, because I am terrible with tech, and that whole world scares me.
You're doing a great job. Like this week I came in and she had taken care of most of the wiring all on her own. Oh my
gosh, it took me forever.
Yeah, but you did a great job, you know, and I was busy this past week. It was a busy week for me, and to not have to worry about that, and that was a blessing to me. So, yeah.
Yes, that is another thing that you've been very patient, and I'm very slow to learn all of the back end stuff of like how to set the stage and wire, and haven't learned the board yet. But
I can't play a piano, so
yeah, that's the other thing. Just like you know, then what songs are we doing on a Sunday, and choosing songs takes a long time. It just you know, you can hear a song for the first time and be like, oh, that's a really cool song, but I almost never just hear a song once and then say, okay, we're going to play this on a Sunday. Like, it just takes a lot of listening for the Spirit of God. And oh, this could be a whole conversation in itself.
Let's have it. So, you know, we can get into the philosophy stuff, I think along with this. You had a little bit of philosophy of worship type of thoughts and questions. And I think that kind of leads into the song choice stuff too, right?
Well, yeah. I guess the question that I would ask you, maybe just out of curiosity and for the sake of the listeners, is, you know, why do we sing the songs that we do? The style of worship that we sing. Why is worship important to us as a church?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of the musical form of it, right?
Right.
I think one of the things I mentioned to you earlier was, you know, there's a lot of traditions that don't incorporate music into their worship. And so their worship is very music-less. And so, you know, why is it important to us, and what's the basis for that? And yeah.
No, very, very good questions. In one of my classes, one of my profs just said how music is like a heightened, oh man, sorry, Dr. Michelle, I'm totally butchering this right now. It's a heightened expression of language. So you can say something, okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but if you sing it.
But if you put it to music, then it allows you to go deeper in that thought or that expression. And while we're on the topic of expression, a really great worship song that I listened to, written by John Thurlow, it talks about what are the words to it? Something along the lines of, like, if you love someone, you express it. And so that's really important. We have a relationship with God through his Spirit. And so if you love someone, you express it to them. Yeah. And so this is a way of expression for the church, to express our love to him.
You can tell someone that you love them, or you can show them.
Yeah. And so here at IPC, like, that's part of my job, is selecting songs and choosing songs. And I love receiving emails with songs that people have sent me, or people come up to me on Sunday mornings.
Do you get a lot of those?
I get a few.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I never
And it's
thought
always
about that.
good. Like, people are just kind of sending me songs, because right now we're in a time when music, like, there's so much music for the church being produced. And so to sift through all of that, it can be daunting. I wouldn't say that I like take a super large amount of time just to like listen to everything that's out there. I just think that sometimes people just want to, produce a music, like a worship song, just to, just to make a song.
I have a question about this. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's been a couple times in the last couple of weeks where I've said, hey, have you heard this song? And you've gone, no. And I've gone, how have I heard that? Because you listen to way more music in this genre than I do. So I was thinking about that. Back when, so I'm 10 years older than you. So you're 27. I'm 37. We won't talk about you. No, I'm kidding.
Methuselah over here. I'll just take a sip of my coffee and try not to waste away.
When I was growing up, right, the new music we heard was whatever somebody put in front of us, plus a WOW worship CD, which Lauren and I were just talking about the other day, right?
Yeah.
Or like the new Newsboys or DC Talk album. And it was, CDs were $30. And so you could only buy so much music. But now you pay $9 a month and you've got access to everything.
Yeah.
And so how has not only song selection, but like new song intake for you changed?
Yeah.
Because even though you're 10 years younger than me, like Spotify still wasn't around when you were starting this job.
Yeah.
It was a much narrower option base.
Yeah.
And now you go from here to this.
Yeah.
And like as a pastor, we feel that because if you're not a very good preacher, whatever that means, somebody can go online and find the 10 best preachers in the world and watch them on YouTube, and that's it.
Yeah.
So, which is something I think about every once in a while. And so like from your perspective, that can both happen, but also like you have way more things to intake, choose from, consider. Has that affected you at all? It must a little bit. You just can't have the time to listen to everything.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely not my goal to like listen to everything that's out there. For me, there are specific worship leaders that I really look up to, and I've been following them for a long time. And just that I really respect, just that they have like a deep knowledge of scripture and how they weave that into their music. I look for songs that aren't vague. Like if you're referring to a scripture, and I find a lot of worship songs too can like use the same language and they're vague, or they're just like, what's the word? Just like,
you love me so much, so very, very much, so very, 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 very much.
it's not even that I just like repetitive songs, but just like, it's not really clear. Like, what are you talking
Yeah.
about? Like when you say that, like, what do you mean? And so like when I choose songs, I have a lot in mind. So I like to know that the person who wrote the song, like, actually has a good head on their shoulders. And like, I like to know the backstory of the song. Like, where in scripture are you pulling this from? Or did you just like think about this one day? And also what songs have gained a lot of traction in a lot of churches, because it's really cool to be singing songs that like the worldwide church is singing. So of course, like a song like Goodness of God, which is just a great praise song anyways, like that's one that has gained a lot of traction in the church world, and a lot of people know and are singing. And so of course I like to integrate some of those songs. Yeah.
Do you have like theological markers in there that you look for? Is there certain you and I have talked a little bit before about like I versus us language. Songs that tell a really personal story might be a really good song, but not necessarily. Like, what's the difference between corporate worship and personal worship, and how do you consider that on a Sunday morning?
Yeah, so there are a lot of songs that artists have written that is a song about their life that they sing. They're telling a story about their life and how God has worked in their life, or they're singing a song to God. And sometimes that works for corporate congregational worship for everyone to sing, and sometimes it just doesn't make sense for the whole church to sing. It can be really inspiring and beautiful to listen to and can point people to Christ. Like, there's no doubt. But when you're choosing songs for people to sing on Sunday, there is a lot of responsibility that comes with that, because as a worship pastor, you are putting words in people's mouths. And the goal is for them to engage with Scripture, to engage with God, and just to have the right view of God and his nature and his character. So there's a lot of things that you're thinking about. Also, there's because so much music is being produced these days, there is so much desire for artists to create something new, flashy, unique, like they want to do something different, and that's awesome. And I love to see creativity in the Christian world, but sometimes songs can be really tricky to sing. Or nowadays, for some reason, all these worship songs have huge octave jumps where you start singing really low, but then to build the song, it goes really high. And actually, now that I've had kids, my voice is not the same, and I can't even always do those octave jumps, or it's really straining my voice. And I'm thinking, if this is hard for me to sing, then it's going to be hard for everybody else to sing. And so even just in choosing, when I'm choosing songs, I have that in mind too. Is this singable? Can people who, singing isn't their job, or they don't even like singing. Some people don't even like singing. And it's are they even going to be able to sing this?
Well, and men and women have generally different standard octave ranges.
That's another thing
you
to
get
think
the Michael
about,
W.
too.
Smiths who can sing from here to here and
Yes.
whatever, but most of us can't.
Yeah.
And so,
So you have to keep all of that in
Yeah.
mind when choosing songs. So is it singable? Who wrote the song, and what was that based out of? Is it actually true? What you're singing, is it true? Will it be true for the person sitting in your pew?
Yeah.
And
That's, I saw that words in your mouth thing is really interesting.
I was just going to bump on that because, this past Sunday morning, we were here in the office. You were you were prepping, and you were in the sanctuary rehearsing with the band.
She's doing the new song. What's the new one called?
Put on Love.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But your comment to me, Mike, was, the thing with Rachel is, she's not just up there singing a song. She's praying.
Yeah.
She's praying
You can hear it.
that song. It's prayer. And
Yeah.
I remember, I don't know, I must have been 100 years ago, a teenager. And and I remember some youth leader. Yeah, something like that. Some youth leader or youth pastor saying to me about worship, that you need to be thinking about what you're singing, because what you're singing is prayer. Your worship is prayer.
Yeah.
And so, when you sing, think about who you're singing to. Ultimately, you're singing to God. And so the words that you sing and the songs that you choose should be a reflection of your heart towards God and what you actually believe about God.
Yeah.
And so I think that's maybe one of the things that, you picked up on Sunday morning, and which I'm hearing from you as you speak about, your process and your heart for worship, is that you pick music that is really prayerful.
Yes.
Even though it might be energetic, it might be contemporary or a whole list of other things, one of those key things for you is this song a prayer? And is it something that I really believe and want to say to God on a Sunday morning?
Yeah.
And is it something I want for the rest of the church corporately? We talked on Sunday a little bit about, the individual versus the corporate, right? In terms of the church shining. This is the same thing in worship, right? There's an individual component where you want to lead each person into that place of worship, but corporately too, we want to bring the church as a body into worship. Anyway, I'll stop.
Yeah, no, and just you saying that made me think of something that's really important and central to congregational corporate worship is the fact that singing allows every person in the room, to some extent, to find unity in what is being said and the heart of the song and the posture of the song too, right? And so by putting words to a melody and having rhythm, like even having a drummer to keep us on time, and the melody of a song, like it brings unity so that we can all come before God in one heart and one spirit, which is the beauty of music. So people might ask, why music? Like, why not painting or like some other art form? But music, like, it unifies us, and that's really important. And that's part of God's design, which is really cool. Like, and all throughout Scripture, we were talking about like God has asked us that we would worship, and He gives clear instruction that we are to use music and use instruments and our voices, and He has gifted certain individuals with the gift of music and musicality, and it's their responsibility to lead the people. And so that's really important. Yeah, I would also say back to like song selection, is it Christ centered? And is the name Jesus even mentioned, or God? Like sometimes you don't even know who you're singing to because it doesn't even mention it in the song. And so sometimes just making it like, I really like choosing songs that it's very clear what we are talking about, what we are singing about here, so that everybody is aware of that. Just like you were saying, your pastor really encouraged you, like, what are you even saying? What are you even singing? Sometimes songs can be very flowery and poetic, and those have their place. And I find that a lot of hymns, the language is different because they were written 100 years ago. And so it can take a little bit more work to kind of figure out what's being said and what the content of the song is. But yeah, like when I choose songs, like I want to make sure that it's very clearly about Jesus and His life and His death and His resurrection, because that is the cornerstone of our faith. And so I keep that in mind when choosing a song. And sorry.
There's like in media, in general, when anybody pokes fun at anything, like comedians, jokes, stand-ups, there's always a little bit of truth in the joke. That's what makes it funny. I know, because you and I have talked, I have never asked you this question. A lot of my preteen teenagers, I watched a lot of Simpsons episodes, and I know we've gone back and forth now and then. James, I don't know if that's a show you ever watched a lot of.
My brother loves
Okay,
Simpsons.
so there you go. There's an episode, and I don't remember much, but I think because I'm in worship, this one, or in ministry, this one always stuck with me. There's an episode where this country singer comes back into Springfield and meets up with Flanders, Flanders is like this, like the right,
devout Christian,
right. And he's like, his wife has died, and so he's sad and everything. And she comes back into town, and he's a little bit smitten. And she's touring through the country singing. And he goes like, well, I thought you used to be a Christian artist. And she went, well, I learned that if I just changed Jesus to Baby and recorded the same songs, we'd make a lot more money. It was a funny joke because then when you look at like there's a little bit of truth. Yeah. And I remember laughing at the time because, that's a little funny. But then as you grow older and you get into this job, you're like, oh, like that one actually hurts a little bit more now that I'm older. Yeah. And I think when you're talking about vague language, or is God even in there? Like that just, I was like, I think about that probably more often than I should, but like, it's important to actually consider, is somebody just trying to write a top 40 hit on the Christian charts?
Yeah. You want there to be theological depth to it so that it can spark things in people's minds as they're singing it. Like, you don't just want it to be just these blanket statements that it's in every other Christian worship song. You really do want people to engage with their mind, like intellectually, about, what's being sung and the scripture that's embedded in almost every song that we sing.
I've got two more, and then I think I'll throw to James to start talking about this coming week. One is, what do you do when you don't feel like it? Right? Like, what do you feel when you don't feel like singing or worshiping, or that's not hitting on that morning, both for you, and what do you think people should think about for that? And two is just on the music selection thing. You know, we've talked about this with lots of people. Music is an art. Art is subjective. And as soon as you get into anything that's subjective, song choice, style, music, pace, instrumentation, you can be having a bad day and your favorite song in the world can come on the radio and you can turn it off because you just don't feel like it, like listening to it. Like, it's one of the reasons that the worship wars, as people would call them, or like, you know, song choice is never going to hit because you could actually love a song and just be having a bad day. And that's it. That's where you live. How do we approach music as a corporate body when we don't like or don't know a song, right? There's a lot of studies that say once you've turned 29, 30, 31, you have listened to all of the new music that you ever really want to listen to. Your key moments in your life and these moments associate to music. It's why I listen to 90s pop and, you know, James listens to the stuff from the 30s. It's because we got to keep the thing going the whole time.
Interestingly, that's not, my kids will tell you that's not far off. I do listen.
Oh boy.
I do listen to some music from the 30s and the 20s for reasons. Anyway.
But like, it's, right. So genre plays, high moments in your life play a time. The fact that we're just sick of learning new things in our 30s because we're dealing with children plays a part. How do people approach Sundays when they're either not feeling it?
Yeah.
When the music isn't what they would have had on their own car and their own radio.
Yeah.
Or even when they're like, I really like this song, it's just not hitting today.
There's a lot of thoughts.
Yeah.
In all the things that you just said. So hopefully I can say something that will help any listener have a great experience in worship. That's my hope. I think a lot of times we ourselves can get in our own way, right? Because like you said, music styles are subjective. Everybody has their own style that they like. And even in the genre of worship, if worship is even a genre, which I don't know if it is, but a lot of people say it is. So, you know, like what I am preparing for Sunday morning and what our band, because it's not just me, it's a whole team of people that, you know, come together and that we make the music. So like, it's not going to be to everyone's taste. And some weeks it'll be simpler and we'll try new songs that, you know, after a while I've learned, okay, this is not a good one. Sometimes you try a song and it's like, no, this is just not going to work for our church, and that's fine. But I do think that sometimes we can get in our own way because we think, oh, well, if they're not playing the song that I like or the way that I like it, like, then I can't connect with God. Like, we like to put things on other people. Like, if they're not preaching on what I want them to preach on, then, well, I'm just going to sit here and be grumpy about it, and I'm not actually going to engage with God, when really the purpose of worship, yeah, right? Who would do that? But, you know, as a leader in a church, you try and do things that people will be excited about and participate in. So you have all these things going through your mind of like, okay, you want to do the old hymns because you know that people love to sing the old hymns, and we did a bunch on Sunday and people were just singing. Oh my goodness. It was amazing. It was beautiful. And that's special because a lot of people sang those old hymns, you know, throughout their lives, and they really mean something to them. They sang those songs as they were going through periods of their life. And so it really, you know, it brings them back to their history with God, which is really cool. So of course I want to bring those in, and I want to do some new songs too, because it's really great to sing a new song that someone has written because they feel like God is doing a new thing in the church and in the world, and you want to bring that in, and you want to encourage and build up the church in new ways. You want to have songs that cover a wide variety of topics, right? So there's lots when you talk about the songs, but really worship is not about the songs. Worship is not even about the music, really. Worship is about, like I said, loving God, but also connecting with Him. And so when you think about those two things, you know, I try my best to lead in that and facilitate that and create an atmosphere, obviously empowered by the Holy Spirit, because I can't create an atmosphere, but just yielding to Christ, yielding to his Spirit, and just, asking him, God, please move. And if he chooses to show us his glory, then that's incredible. And if he chooses not to, then that's okay, because he's still worthy. And so some days you just come into worship, you come, to church, and you just got into a fight with your spouse, your kids are screaming at you the whole way here or whatever. Like, it's hard. And sometimes I have those mornings coming in and leading, and I just have to remind myself that worship is just about loving God. And so coming into his presence, there's repentance, right? Just repenting for my own sin, and just how we can get in our own ways, for my pride, for my selfishness, and wanting things to be a certain way that I like. Oh God, I can't connect with you if this team isn't going to play the song that I want them to, or if they keep playing the wrong chords or whatever. Like, it really does just take this shift of mentality when you come in. And sometimes, even if you don't know the song, I know that I have been moved to tears because, for whatever reason, I didn't even know the song that the worship team was playing that day. I just felt the Spirit of God in it. And I felt like whatever was happening in that space, the Spirit was doing something inside of me, which is a really beautiful part of worship. Worship has so many benefits for us as the Christian and as the believer. Like, God can just come and touch on he transforms our hearts. And that's what we need, because sin really does and can embed itself in our lives. And sometimes we're not even aware of it. And so we need the Spirit of God to come and work. And it's mysterious and we don't know how, but we need to give him the time and the space to do that. Yeah. And it's not a quick fix. Like, it's not a quick process. It takes years. It takes a lifetime, and we don't even get there. And so worship has a lot of beauty in it if we just leave our agendas and we just sit in his presence. And we're not always going to feel it. Worship is a discipline. It really is. It's coming in and just saying, God, you are worthy of everything. And the measly things that I have to give you, like, it's not even enough, and it will never be enough. These words and these songs that, writers and artists have spent hours mulling over and creating and working, like, it's just a small, measly offering for him, right? And what do I have of value to bring before God? But all that he says is that he wants us. God is jealous. He's a jealous God. He wants us. And he does not want our affections to be swayed. He wants us just to behold him. And a quote that I love from Bill Johnson is, "You become what you behold." And so if we turn our eyes to Jesus, we will become more like him, because we are sitting with him and we are in his presence. And honestly, it's a beautiful journey that God has invited us into. And it makes me emotional, because really it does take a long time to learn. And it just takes, just putting our agendas to the side. And when we can come together corporately, it's really beautiful too, because not only are we singing to God, like you said, but we're also singing to each other. And it's kind of like we're rallying around these focal points of our faith, like when we sing, what do we sing on Sunday? But I will boast in Jesus Christ, his death and resurrection. Like, we're singing that to God, but we're singing that to the world. Like, we will boast not in ourselves. We will boast in Jesus Christ, his death and his resurrection. Like, those really central pieces of our faith that we can just gather and sing about together and worship God together in those things. Anyways.
I think Rachel was just preaching for us. It's really cool. Yeah. I love the passion that's coming out of you right now. So good. I not discounting that people have different, love languages in terms of their worship. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I think the point that you're trying to make is worship's not about you or me, or right. It's worship's about God, right? It's about ascribing worth and value to God and who God is. And that's a good frame of mind to sort of get into as we enter into worship. This isn't about me. It's about God.
Right. Yeah.
The first week of this Unshakable series, I said a handful of things that I heard people come back from. And I think one of the things I said was Rachel could not choose a single song that you like over the next 4 months, and you should still be able to grow and deepen your faith.
Yeah,
right.
I remember that.
And that's kind of what we're talking about. It's,
if your relationship with God hinges on you and me, then we're in big trouble. Right?
Yeah. That's kind of how I feel most of the time. Not about you, about me.
Yeah, no.
No, that's true. Yeah. Well, why don't you get into this week a little bit? Because we're headed into this worship service. We've all sort of come together. What do you think about as we're headed towards this week? How, listening to Rachel, going through the classes that you've gone through lately and the things that we sort of experience week to week here, how do you think people should come prepared for this Sunday's service?
Yeah. Again, I think it's this idea of, one of the focuses I think that we're trying to hit on is, how do we worship? What are the different ways that we can worship and ascribe worship to God? And so I'm looking forward to a bit of variety, and I presume that we'll have a bit of variety. We'll learn a little bit more about what it means to lift your hands and so forth. And so I think one of the things maybe we should bring to this week is an openness. An openness to experience worship in a way that maybe we haven't experienced it before. And I think one of the values of doing it corporately as a church is that, because I grew up in the CRC, and I love the CRC still to this day, formed me in my faith. But in a lot of CRC churches growing up, people did not raise their hands in worship. That just was not done. And so, there would be times where I would feel like expressing that, but, nobody else is doing it, right? So I guess I won't do that. And so one of the unique things about doing this...
Sorry, hold on. Before you... and we talked about that as we prepped this week too. That's a real thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's a real thing when you feel God moving you to worship, whether it's corporately or at a stop sign or at work, and you look at your surroundings and you go, no, not here. That's a little bit what we were talking about on Sunday.
Yeah.
Right. This idea of don't let, Moses was saying, don't let the Israelites of the past influence your ability to worship. And Paul's saying to the Philippian church, don't let all of the outside noise influence your ability to worship. What's terrifying is that it happens in here. That's actually terrifying, that people walk in here or into any church and go, I feel God nudging me towards an expression of worship that I don't feel comfortable leaning into. That's now there's a lot of that's corporate, that's personal, that's whatever. There's a lot of baggage. There's a lot of layers, but we got to fix that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
no.
But that's just been, and you and I have talked, that point was, and I don't know you were going to say, that was kind of one of my big pieces of this coming Sunday. It's how do we open the door more?
Yeah.
I'm sorry that I didn't know that happened to you. I'm sorry that it did, because that's got to be really hard. And I mean, it's happened to me, but that's really hard to sit in.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think one of the benefits of doing a service like this is creating opportunities to do things corporately where we take away that anxiety or even that excuse to say that, we're just all going to try it together and see what does it actually feel like to raise our hands in worship? What does it actually feel like to do the things that maybe we wouldn't normally be willing to try because we're not sure if anybody else is going to do it. And that's a neat idea, to sort of explore and expand on. I would say, come with an open mind, come with a willing heart, and come with a desire to meet Jesus. I think every Sunday you should have that. Even if you've had an argument in the car, or the kids are throwing Cheerios at you, whatever it is, there's a point at which when you walk into the church building, you say, you know what, all of that aside, I'm here to meet with God. Mm-hmm. And in this place, if nowhere else, I mean, we should be living it every day of our lives, but if nowhere else this week, this is the place and this is the opportunity in quote unquote God's house, to be with God, to put him first. And when you come out of that worship service, suddenly the Cheerios flying in the car wasn't really that big of a deal after all, was it? It changes your perspective too on the things that are going on in your life. And I think this will be a neat opportunity to become more worshipful through a unique experience.
You've talked about what we bring our mind, bring our heart, bring our desire to get to know God. Rachel, what should we leave? What should we leave at home? What should we leave in the van? What should we leave at the door? If we're going to bring those desires with us, what are the things that we need to leave in order to sort of enter a space where we're really focused?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if I know how to answer that question. I would say there are certain things that can follow us into, a time that we've set aside, like dedicated to connect with God. And so things that you just want to leave are just like feelings of shame, like just things that are not from God. Shame is something that God he canceled at the cross, like we no longer have to live with that kind of baggage in our lives because we are fully forgiven. And so we have burdens. Every person has burdens that we bring with us, right? And so there are just things that are not from God that he says, throw those things off, because in my presence, there's freedom from those things. So my hope would be that when people come into a space of worship like this, like congregational worship, that they would just experience the freedom of the Spirit and the love of Christ, where they no longer have to carry the weight of their sin and the weight of shame or guilt or their past, because God has rewritten that all and he's forgiven it all. He's covered it all. So I would say, yeah.
I think it's hard sometimes to forget your past when a Cheerio just flew past your head 4 seconds ago. But you're right? Yeah. We bring, and we don't leave them. And I should just clarify this too, because the amount of conversations that we've all been a part of, where it's like, yeah, you're fighting, you're arguing in the car, and then you walk in the air and you're like, hey, everybody, right? It's like, I'm leaving my bad attitudes and my problems. You can actually, right? Leaving your shame and your sin and your embarrassment is actually different than leaving your problems. You can bring those in. Like bring the stuff that you're struggling with in. Yeah. And there's an understanding that the shame comes with it, but that's the thing we're actually trying to work on. We're not trying to make you a better person in 60 minutes or less, so that you go out into the world and whatever. We're because that's this level. This level is the shame level. It's the sin level. It's that level, right? It's the thing that sets off the alarm bells or cars.
And also too, I would just say, what do you want to leave behind? Any agenda that you may bring.
Yeah. Sorry.
I hope that's not my vehicle.
No, it's Amberly's. Let's take a quick break. Hold on.
A few moments later.
And we're back. Sorry, go ahead.
No, the only thing I was just going to say is what you want to leave behind is any agenda that you may bring.
Yeah.
And just come in, like you said, just with this openness, God, I'm here. I'm present. I want to be present with you in this moment. I've got all this stuff going on and I'm not hiding it. I don't need to hide in the light of Christ, but this is who I am, but I'm still choosing, despite everything going on, I'm still choosing to give you praise and worship, and everything else can just kind of fall to the side. No agenda, just being with God and giving him love and just allowing his spirit to move in any way that he wants. And sometimes we're not even aware of what he's doing. So
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a cool opportunity.
We're excited about this week, not just for that, but because it also kicks off at 11 o'clock this week. It kicks off our week of 24/7 prayer. I think a lot of what you've said this week, and you can get folded into how we feel about prayer too. What if I don't feel like it? What am I bringing? Am I embarrassed? Do I, all of these pieces, do I, different styles of prayer. I think all of these come into play too. We'll be sending out a bunch of stuff this week to highlight what those looks like and to try to encourage people. But if you're listening to this before February 4th, sign up, get in there, right? And have some fun. Okay. Last question. This is the heavy one. This is the heavy hitter. This is a big one. You don't need to consider everything we've talked about in the last hour to answer this question. Okay. You can use some of it or you can throw it all out. Top favorite couple worship songs.
Easy.
What's on your list?
Yeah.
Do you know yours? We'll let her go first.
Yeah, let her go first.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never had an answer to this, except I've realized that a song that I always come back to in corporate worship is called Christ is Risen by Maher. And we've sang it at the church for years. I've sang it since I was a teen. And, the message of that song is so good. And the power behind those lyrics is just, I really feel the Spirit of God at work in that song every time. And I really love songs that just focus on God and his nature and, the fact that he's alive and that he's defeated sin, he's defeated the grave. Like, we no longer need to let sin and shame hold us back anymore. And it's just such an empowering song for the church to sing and proclaim and declare. So listen to it if you haven't already. It's definitely a fave.
There you go.
Yeah.
Do you have any
What about
more?
you?
Just one? I've got three, so I feel bad. Do you have
go
another
for
one?
it.
Do you have another one?
I'll
not a
think about it.
competition.
I don't know.
Okay, we'll let you think for a second. What about you?
It changes. I mean, you have favorites today that maybe tomorrow they're not anymore. But right now, I think the two that I really like, one is King of Kings. And I can't think of who sings it, but there's
It's
this.
Hillsong.
Is it Hillsong?
It's Brooke Fraser. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a chorus in there that talks, it's a swelling of the music, and the Church of Christ was born, and the Spirit lit the flame. And I just, that one just hits me every time.
That's a great one.
And I know I've requested it the odd time, but
we do it.
yeah.
Don't want to overdo it.
You don't want to overdo it. Yeah,
It's not an every week kind of song.
exactly. Yeah.
Sorry, Brooke.
The other one I really like, I think, is a Phil Wickham song, and it's Praise.
The one that we just started doing.
It might be, or it might be a different
As
one.
long as I'm breathing, I've got a reason to praise. That one?
It could be that one. I put it on. Usually I listen to it on YouTube because I just love the way they dance around, and it's exciting.
Yeah, I think it's good.
It's a really good song.
Elevation. It's by Elevation.
Is it by
worship.
Elevation?
Yeah.
Okay. No,
Just
the
a
one
big dance
I'm
party.
thinking of is definitely a Phil Wickham song.
Oh, okay.
So it's probably a different one, but it's a song. It's a psalm. He's taken a psalm essentially and
Nice.
turned it into worship. And again, when we talked earlier about is this song scriptural? There's a movement right now, and there's an artist in the States who is trying to put all of the psalms to music in a contemporary way. Which I think is just really cool. But yeah, those are my two favorites right now. It's definitely a Phil Wickham song.
Can't find it, but we'll put a link.
Yeah.
We'll put a link in the podcast.
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
fine. Because I'm old, I go back. So my three, so anything early 2000s Hillsong United for me is like my jam. So give me Solution and give me, that whole I Heart Revolution album. But I mean, the amount of times that I listen to Solution over and over and over and just how it talks about looking to Jesus, and this is how we figure this stuff out. And I mean, it's a rock song, so let's go. I go the complete other way with my second one, which is this sort of old, it falls into that, you know how we were talking about like that Shine on Me phase where they were kind of trying to get out of, it was those early praise musics. It was like CCM before it was worship music. There's a song called Jehovah Jireh. Right? Jehovah Jireh, my provider, his faith is sufficient. Yeah, right. See, okay.
Yeah, I know that one.
Yeah.
James loves that.
That's right. So my dad became a Christian when I was 4 or 5, and he was in his mid-30s, and I just he walked around our house just singing that song all the time.
Aww,
I know. So
that's special.
For me, it's a family ministry, but it's a memory, but it's probably also one of the first ones that I really I just he was so excited to know Jesus, and he just couldn't sing anything other than that and 2 or 3 other ones, and we'd walk around the house and it was a whole thing. So that was fun.
Cool.
And then I always liked Heart of Worship. I like the story more than the song, although I think I played and led that song a whole bunch of times. But just like the concept that an entire church and a fairly well-known worship leader just sat down and went we got to strip this down for a while.
Yeah.
I think was really cool.
Yeah.
So
cool. Yeah.
Do you have any more, or is it if you could only listen to one artist, one Christian artist for the rest of where would you go?
Okay. Well, artist, Leland.
Oh, no way.
Leland Moore, I think is his last name. He is one of my top
it's Lion in the Lamb,
leaders. Right? He wrote Lion in the Lamb.
Okay.
He has several albums, and on one of his albums, he wrote a song called Perfect Love. And it's the song of the prodigal son returning, and just talking about God's perfect love, how it casts out all fear. And he writes it in a way that you are the prodigal returning. I ran away from home. You loved me, Lord. Because it's true for all of us that we are all prodigals returning to God, right? And so and then the bridge is just, you never stop chasing us. You never stop chasing us. And I just love that idea of God pursuing us. It's not just we're trying in our own strength to love God and be good for God. It's he started this whole conversation by creating us and saying, I chose you and I love you. And he's pursuing us. And so we just get to respond to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Leland, just listen to any of his stuff. He also wrote Waymaker, which is another fave. Oh, so good. Love that song. So anyways. Yeah.
Well, this was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me.
If people come, if people listen to this before this coming Sunday, February the 4th, I mean, there's a lot here. Again, I think the things that you just said, bring your mind and your heart and your desire to get to know Jesus. Leave your shame, leave your sin, leave your embarrassment, leave the things that are going to prevent that behind, leave your preferences, leave your bent towards a certain genre, and just come and let's just praise and discover together. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
James, what's exciting? What do you got going on this week? What are you looking forward to? I ask him every week for the last 3 weeks, and every week he looks surprised.
I'm never prepared for this question.
What are you excited about this week? What's going on?
What's going on this week? Well, I'm still waiting to find out about the car. So maybe I'll get to go car shopping this week.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I'm back in Toronto on Friday for my second class. So that'll be good. Yeah.
You went to class 1 in a rental.
I did. I might get to go to class 2 in the rental.
Yeah, okay.
So, and I think I have to write a sermon
for a couple of weeks from now. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So.
You're preaching on us not doing things in our own strength, which is what you were talking about just a little while ago.
Oh, cool.
I think so. I'm excited. Anyway.
Cool.
So I'm excited about that one. How about you? What's going on this week? What are you excited about?
Ooh, well, we have got a big worship set for Sunday, and so just. We've got a big rehearsal happening on Thursday and just lots of prep going into Sunday, and I'm really looking forward to that. So yeah, other than that, just chilling with my kids and hanging out.
There you go. Watching a lot of Puffin
Puff and rock.
Puff and rock. Okay. Well, thanks so much for being here. You're welcome back anytime. I know for sure. And thanks for taking the time this week. We hope everybody has a great week. As always, if you have any questions, we got one.
We did.
But we didn't have time this week, so we'll do it first next week. We got one about Bible versions and what to choose and what to look into. So we will dive into that next week. But if you have any other questions about this or anything else, questions at thrive@ipc.com. Have a great week, James.
You too.
Have a great week, Rachel.
Thank you.
We'll see
Thanks,
everybody
guys.
on Sunday morning. Bye.